You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greeks Gridiron and to some more UFL Power Rankings with Week 6 in the books. We are now looking onward to Week number 7. It is time to put all 8 of these teams of the UFL from worst to first. I'll kind of recap this past weekend's games. I'll share why I have the teams where I have them. And of course, as always, we're going from worst to first in order, starting with number 8. So I invite you all to do the same in the comment section down below. Let's talk why these teams are where they are. Do you agree or disagree? I would love to hear from you all. And just a minor announcement, and I have another bigger one coming up very soon. It kind of got pushed back due to a delay and an issue, but it's going to be coming soon. But a minor one that I decided I would bring up to you all today. I will be dropping, for those of you that have been interested in this shirt specifically that you see me wearing here on all my videos, I will be dropping some Greeks Gridiron merch. If you are interested in getting yourself a t-shirt, my goal is for them to be very similar to what it is that I have on. This was just a kind of a run of shirts I did for like family and friends years ago, and I've just had them kind of lying around here, but I don't have a lot of them. So my goal is I'm partnering up with Teespring. I'm trying to get the price down as low as possible for you all. I don't want these shirts to be expensive. I don't really care about making money off of the shirts. My goal is to just get them out there for you all. So for those of you that want to support, you're more than able to. I'm trying to get the price as close to $20 as possible. That's basically my only goal here, is I don't want these shirts to be expensive. It's not like some super sexy fabric or anything like that. It's just a nice, well-fitting, comfortable t-shirt the way I like to wear my t-shirts. So just know that that stuff is coming very soon. Not quite done yet, but it is coming very soon. That being said, we'll dive into some rankings here. We'll start with the very bottom of the UFL, and sitting at number 8, where they have been pretty much for the last, I would say, month or so, we got the Memphis Showboats. Continuing to get the doors blown off of them, what feels like week in and week out at this point, falling 39-21 to the Birmingham Stallions. This game was pretty much over in the second quarter when they allowed 22 points in that singular quarter there. They had no answers for what Birmingham was doing on offense. They allowed 466 total yards altogether. Adrian Martinez was averaging 16 yards per completion in the game here. And if Birmingham didn't miss a field goal in the fourth quarter, you're looking at preventing points on only 3 of Birmingham's offensive possessions this entire game, and that's not including the final possession at the end of the game that ultimately wound up in the clock hitting 0. And the offense was honestly not much better on their end either. You had 3 total turnovers on the day. You had 5 drives that went for 3 plays or less, and in those 5 drives totaled for a whopping 2 yards altogether. Had it not been for the 12 garbage time points you got in the fourth quarter, you know, this game looked a lot closer final score-wise than it actually was when you sat down and watched the game. And there was not really a point within this matchup here that you felt like Memphis was going to come on some comeback tear and potentially steal this game away from Birmingham. It felt like it was Birmingham's game from start to finish very early in this one here. And when you look at this team now, you're allowing 28.5 points per game. You have a league worst point differential, I believe, of -64 is the number that they're sitting at right now. That math might be wrong. I just kind of did it quickly, but I think it's -64, which is a league low, and then a league worst turnover margin of -4 with 12 total offensive turnovers this season. I do not expect that late season turnaround that we got from Memphis last season, where they were basically racing to a potential playoff spot into the very last week of the season. It seems like this is a team that had some very high expectations based off some of the talent that they got to be able to add to the roster, and are ultimately not going to reach some of those or basically all those high expectations, I guess you could say here, which is tough because I was really excited to see how Memphis was going to do in this season, and it has not been, I think, what anyone has been expecting. And unfortunate considering you had a really good start to the season, that first game or two, where, you know, even in that second loss, you didn't walk away feeling like, oh, you know, this is a bad team after a good strong start in week 1, but this is not a good team from basically week 2 on, and it's a tough situation to see Memphis in. Going into the number 7 team, we have ourselves a lot of movement going on in this week's power rankings, I should state, and this is the first of the movement we'll see here. The Houston Roughnecks with their 22-8 loss to the St. Louis Battlehawks. There is a fair argument that maybe, you know, the final score doesn't necessarily show the true outcome of this game, and maybe just how close Houston was in this matchup here. Houston hung on in a game that was really tight against one of the top 2 teams in the UFL right now in the St. Louis Battlehawks. They kept it close. They had a shot. It was not like they were down and out the entirety of the game. This game was close for a very long time. So there is credit that needs to be given here. But this ranking that I have them in, dropping below the Arlington Renegades now, who they have a win over, their lone win, in fact, it really just has to do with how dead in the water this offense feels in Houston right now. They're averaging just 14 points per game, and honestly, you can thank the defense and some of the defensive touchdowns they have that help inflate that number a little bit, because it could be lower if you wanted to look at just solely offensive points scored. You are tied for second in offensive turnovers this season, a league low of only 9 touchdowns right now, the only team with single-digit offensive touchdowns. This is the worst, and I don't really think there's an argument worst offense in the UFL so far this season, and I don't really anticipate that changing at any point during the remainder of this season. There's just too many things that are not going right. You're not getting enough production, and it's unfortunate because I feel like Houston was in this weird spot where, Mark Thompson starts the season injured. You lose your starting cornerback as well pretty early in the season, so Houston's been kind of dealt some tough blows here and there, and it sucks because you have a defense that has been pretty good and has been hanging on strong week in and week out, and yes, has had some games where they haven't looked necessarily great, but they have been the bright spot of this team here. Yes, they allowed 3 touchdowns and 255 yards against A.J. McCarron, but I mean, what are you going to do when you're dealing with A.J. and Hakeem Butler, who seems to be playing with children whenever he's playing football? It makes no sense how big he is compared to everybody else, but I mean, what are you going to do? On top of that, I mean, you have this rushing attack that has been blowing doors off of teams over the last, like St. Louis was averaging, I think, 102 yards or so coming into this matchup here. And the run defense looks good. 32 yards, 16 rushing attempts. Like, you had a solid performance from this defense. And again, you kept the game close. It wasn't until very late in the game where St. Louis really got themselves in a position where they were comfortable and they were going to lock up this victory here. And I don't want to sit here and act like I felt like St. Louis might potentially lose this game, because when you see the way this offense in Houston operates, it doesn't really provide a ton of hope. And I hate saying stuff like that because it's not me trying to talk trash. It's just this is what I'm seeing here, and this is how I feel during these games, and I'm just being honest about it. But you come away with A.J. McCarron's only 2nd interception this season. Like, there are positives to look at from this defense and them trying to keep this team in games here. But when the offense is as flat as it is, what can you really do? So even though Houston, again, does have their one victory against the Arlington Renegades, who I do have obviously ranked above them as they're not in the rankings yet here so far, the offense is just, it's not that they're just worst in the league. It's like worst by a wide margin. Whereas like when you look at Arlington, they have a really good offense that can compete, but the defense has not been great and has kind of been the reason why they end up dropping all their games so far this season when things get really close. Whereas like with Houston, offense is worse in the league, and it's by what feels like a significant margin, and they're the only team right now under 100 points put on the board, and going up against what is a tough San Antonio defense next week, they could be under 100 points forced for the season coming out of week number 7 as well. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about Houston and why I have them at 7. If you think they should be above Arlington, obviously because of the head-to-head being a big thing, yes, I understand that, but do I think Houston and Arlington going head-to-head, maybe 10 times straight, does Houston come out victorious 6 out of those 4 games to be the better team out of the 2? I don't necessarily know. I think it's maybe a pretty even 50-50 split, and if you like one or the other, it's just a matter of who you are and what you are prioritizing and what you like a little bit more about each team that has you ranking one above the other. So if you think that Houston should be above Arlington, believe me, I understand, and I think you have some fair arguments to make. Coming in at number 6 is going to be those Arlington Renegades here. And a little bit more on why I'm rationalizing Arlington over Houston here. They just cannot seem to catch a break, especially in these tight games here. They have now lost 3 different games of the 6 that they've lost this season to game-winning field goals. And it took some mental gymnastics for me to kind of be okay with this, but I feel like Arlington is better than their 0-6 record makes them look. And I mean, again, 3 losses off of 3 field goals. There's a shot that, if those kicks go the wrong way, Arlington is maybe 1-5, maybe 2-4, hell, maybe even 3-3 if St. Louis misses their field goal, and ultimately maybe Arlington finds a way to get points and win in overtime, whatever it ends up being here. But they have lost 3 games on game-winning field goals at this point, so I do think they are better than what their record shows. And despite a few bumps in the road, Arlington continues to show that their offense is one of the better units in the UFL, and they can compete. I mean, they're the second best passing offense in terms of yards per game right now. They're tied with St. Louis for the least offensive turnovers. They're a very efficient team. They do a good job of protecting the football. They even have the best third down conversion rate off of the highest number of third down attempts in the UFL right now. There is a lot to like about this offense here, and they've even found some success this past week running the football. They were averaging 5 yards per attempt for a team that is not really known for running the football. Good on them in this matchup here. But it really just comes down to Arlington's inability to stop teams on defense, and that's basically why they are where they are right now. I mean, they have allowed the second most points per game right now this season behind only Memphis. They have the third worst third down stop rate. They have the worst fourth down stop rate, having allowed 5 conversions off of just 7 attempts, which puts them at like 71% allowed. Whereas when you look at the team that is in front of them, St. Louis, they have allowed 6 attempts, 6 conversions, 1 more, but off of 13 attempts. So Arlington, not great when it comes to getting teams off the football field, obviously, and they are tied for last in takeaways with Houston. They're not an opportunistic defense. They have a really hard time keeping teams off the field, or getting teams off the field, rather, and it's ultimately what's doing them in. And it's unfortunate because this is the defending XFL champions who are now sitting at 0-6, who are staring down elimination from the playoffs. Thankfully, because of the way the DC and San Antonio game went down, I think there's like some ludicrous way that they're technically still in the running for a playoff spot, even though they're 0-6. It's very unlikely. I would love to see the mathematical probability of that, but it's been rough for Arlington, and Arlington fans, I feel for you, because again, this is a team that is very close to being maybe even 3-3 if field goals break their way. So it is what it is. They are 0-6. I do think they're a little bit better than their record, hence why I have them at the number 6 spot above 2 teams that have a singular win so far this season. Coming in at number 5, and I've got to say, coming off of a really shocking loss this week, one of the more shocking losses in my opinion so far this season, and that's going to be the San Antonio Brahmas losing 18-12 to the DC Defenders. I kind of feel like the Quentin Dormady hype train may have left the building potentially here. If there was any game that I felt like Dormady was going to come in and absolutely torch a defense, this was probably the defense to do it against, because when you look at statistically the way DC has been against passing attacks, they have not been good. They were going into this matchup the worst in the UFL, and thankfully, because they had a really great game against an offense that, is dealing with a backup quarterback, but Dormady has been, up and down, but has had some really high highs, but also some low lows. I was very shocked at the way things looked. I mean, he went 16-26, 79 yards, touchdown, interception. He was averaging just 4.2 yards per attempt passing. They were basically stuck in a situation where DC was allowing them to dink and dunk, but that was about it. Like, they kept everything in front of them, and it gave San Antonio issues through the air. The unfortunate side of things is this is also in the same game where you as a team went for 200 yards rushing on the ground. John Lovett could do nothing besides find massive gaping holes and get, he's averaging 6.3 yards per attempt for 153 yards on the evening. Like, he could do no wrong every time he had the football handed off to him. So really unfortunate that that's how things go out. I mean, your first 3 drives of the game, just an awful start. You go interception, turnover on downs, 3 and out. It was a disaster start to the game, and it just simply took way too long for this offense to get going. And that's typically what'll happen. You end up losing a tight, low-scoring affair because you're throwing opportunities away early in the game back to back to back. It's just kind of how things break in football. But I think what shocked me the most was just the inability of the defense to really capitalize on anything. It's not like DC has been a perfect offense by any means this season, and between the lack of pressure and just inability to really win from the defensive line, I mean, San Antonio probably has the second best defensive front in the UFL behind only Birmingham. I would say that's probably the one team you could put in front of them. Maybe there's an argument between them and St. Louis, but I would look at San Antonio as the second best defensive front in the UFL, and for them to finish the day with not a lot of pressure, 1 sack, just a single tackle for loss, I mean, they could not deal with what DC has up front on their offensive line. And I don't want to sit here and knock on DC's offensive offensive line, because for what it's worth and the struggles DC has had, they do boast one of the better offensive lines in the UFL, especially in terms of pass protection. They do an excellent job of protecting Jordan Te'amu. So this was definitely one of the more shocking losses to me this season, and I really did not expect San Antonio to drop this game, but here we are. Anything can happen in football any given Sunday. It's, one of those things that rings true week in and week out when it comes to football, whether it's the NFL or something like spring football in the UFL. It rings true throughout. But that line that I feel like I had mentally drawn, where I was like, the league has been, and I talked about this the last few weeks too, where it felt like the league was kind of split in half. You had the bottom 4 teams and the top 4 teams, and they were just kind of trading places as the weeks went by. But now that line's kind of gone. It's been erased. I mean, San Antonio, I had at number 3 last week. They dropped down to number 5 now. DC slips into the top half, and the Panthers move up because of that as well, and also their clutch time victory as well. I'll be very interested to see what happens to San Antonio going forward, because this is a really good defense now with questions and definitely some concerns, I would say, over the last couple of weeks with the quarterback spot, but a resurgence, or I guess ascension for the run game. I don't really know what you want to call it, but we've seen John Lovett now have some really good games, so I'm curious to see if maybe they lean into that rushing attack a little bit more and try to expose some defenses, but we'll see. Moving into the top half of the UFL, finding themselves up here, I believe for the first time this season, at least in my power rankings, we're looking at the DC Defenders. Bit of a wonky win, but credit where it is due. DC has been a tough watch this season, especially on the defensive side. They have been terrible when it comes to defending against the pass, and going into this game here, as I stated when I was talking about San Antonio, I thought Quinton Dormady was going to come in here and maybe have a fantastic bounce-back game, absolutely light them up through the air. Maybe you find some action on the ground, but I thought it was going to be all day Quinton Dormady passing the football, just slicing and dicing, but you have got to give this defense credit. They did a phenomenal job keeping everything in front of them, not getting burned on deep plays. They were not biting on anything. They did an excellent job just keeping all of the passing plays in front of them. Obviously, letting up 200 yards on the ground is not ideal, but in a situation where we are in a football world where passing first is the key to success for offenses and typically winning football games, in this world, you can get away with 200 yards rushing allowed and still win football games here. But I mean, you allowed just a measly 4.2 yards per attempt from Quinton Dormady, adding a couple of sacks. This is probably the best this defense has looked against the pass all season long. Now, rushing stuff aside, the 6.5 yards per attempt, not great, but again, overall, this is a really good performance from DC, and this was the lowest point total they've allowed this season with just 12 points. So potentially a good step in the right direction, and potentially what causes maybe a little bit of a resurgence and maybe a threat to find their way into a spot into the XFL side of the playoffs here. The offense themselves also definitely deserve some praise in this game here. Fairly complete game, all things considered, with the way this offense has looked throughout the season. I would say when you look at score aside, because it is only 18 points, probably one of their better performances this season. Jordan Te'amu went for a 64% completion rate, which is fantastic. That's the first time he's gone above 60% this entire season. He has been sitting somewhere around like 52% average or so, like for at least the last 3 or 4 weeks, something along those lines. Kelvin Harmon racked up 8 of the 14 total receptions that were made by the receivers, 101 yards and a touchdown. Basically took it upon himself to help DC win this football game here. You found some success running the football, which has obviously been a really big issue with DC. Losing Abraham Smith basically was a massive shot into the foot of the offense here. And Darius Hagens, Cameron Harris steps in, 4.5 yards per attempt roughly, 102 yards, score on the ground. By far, one of the more complete performances we've seen from this offense. They were terrible on third down still, 3 of 10, but that's kind of been the status quo for DC. They are awful on third down. I think they are the worst or second worst third down offense in the UFL, but all things besides that, pretty good performance. I'm excited to see how things go for them going forward. If we can get more of this defensive type of effort from DC, they have a shot. That's all I can say. They have a shot right now. They're at 3-3. They just got a big win over a team that was in front of them that's keeping them outside of the XFL playoff race. I would say it's basically between them and the Brahmas at this point here, because the Renegades, again, they're mathematically still in play, but I don't really see any miracle 4 straight wins and then everyone else just losing out and you finding your way into the playoffs. So DC still has a chance, and I'm excited for it because it adds more intrigue to what's going on in the XFL side of things. Coming in at the number 3 spot, moving up here, nice clutch time victory. Things got a little dicey, but between you winning, San Antonio dropping with DC obviously getting the big upset, the Michigan Panthers now find themselves at the number 3 spot. If Jake Bates isn't on an NFL roster next season, I might have to eat a shoe or something, because this guy is an absolute stud. 5 field goals in this game here, including another 60-yarder and a game-winning field goal. Michigan is not 4-2 without him. I cannot stress that enough. This team's probably more than likely 2-4, maybe even 1-5, minus the effort from Jake Bates that we've seen from him this season. Danny Etling has been doing a really good job as quarterback 1. I wouldn't say lighting the world on fire by any means, but doing a good job of taking care of the ball, making plays happen. 202 yards passing. He had 55 yards rushing on the ground. He had a touchdown as well. And Marcus Sims, basically, I feel like I have to shout this guy out every single week, because he is averaging, like, it feels like 30 yards per reception. Like, his reception average is a wild number. Go ahead, look at it on the stats on UFL.com. The number makes no sense, but it's real. It's very real. Another 39-yard reception for him. His average is somewhere close to 30 per reception. It makes no sense, but it is there, and I feel like I have to shout him out every single week, because he's making a big catch like that every single week. But Michigan's been a bit of a weird team, I would say, offensively this year. Offensive line continues to kind of be a concern. They allowed 3 more sacks this past week, a lot more pressure on top of that as well. But they keep finding ways to win, and even if they're not finishing drives with touchdowns, thank the good Lord, they have Jake Bates, because he is literally an offense on his own. He's averaging what feels like more points per game than what we're getting out of the Houston Roughnecks offense as a whole. So, I mean, he's a weapon for this offense. He truly is. Even if he has special teams, he is a weapon for that offense in putting points on the board. Defensively, I would say about an average or so day. It wasn't anything great by any means, but when you're going up against Arlington, who is able to move the football pretty effectively through the air, like Luis Perez is really good at taking care of the ball. He's typically good at finding weak spots in the defense and taking advantage, finding his receivers and moving the football up and down the field. So, I mean, it's not like I'm going to sit here and say that this was some bad performance or that I'm going to harp on them for anything. I would say it was an average or so performance. Didn't really blow me away, and you hung on, bend don't break type of week, if you will. You did allow Arlington to get going on the ground a little bit with 111 yards. They had themselves 5 yards per attempt, but I mean, bend but don't break type of game is kind of how I look at it. Feels weird having Michigan at number 3, because I don't really know what to make of them still, but when I look at just kind of the state of the rest of the league, this is where they have to be, in my opinion. So I'll take them at number 3. We'll see where it goes from here, but I'm excited for Michigan. 4-2. Michigan doing well, I think, is good for the league, so I'm happy to see them where they are. Coming in at the number 2 spot, we always have to do this, kind of pause, create a little bit of tension here. I feel like every single week I have to consider this, because what St. Louis does week in and week out is exciting to watch. What Birmingham does week in and week out is very exciting to watch. But going off of what just happened this past week, things got a little tight for St. Louis, a little bit scary. So I decided I'll keep them at number 2 still, right behind Birmingham. The good news is they have their opportunity to take that number 1 throne this week in week 7 when they go up against Birmingham. But I will say, A.J. McCarron continues to kind of do his thing as a passer. 65% completion rate, 3 touchdowns, 255 yards. He had an interception, but I mean, overall, he's just continuing to tear up the league as he does best. Hakeem Butler is literally a man amongst boys. I think I said that last week, but I feel like I have to reiterate it and like overemphasize that point, because watching him play against everyone else does not make sense. Like, the dude is 6'6", 230 pounds, and he can move. And it literally feels effortless watching him play. That's the only way I can describe it. I love watching it. It feels like an NFL type of connection watching A.J. McCarron to Hakeem Butler. It is truly a marvel to like be able to witness. So I'm here for it. Butler, in my opinion, is the best wide receiver in the UFL. I don't really know who else could be in that conversation, just considering how dominant he is. 6 catches, 134 yards, 2 more touchdowns this week. I mean, the guy is just tearing it up, and he should probably be on an NFL roster somewhere going into this season as well. I'd be shocked if he's not at least on a practice squad for the duration of the season, but I do think he could be a number 6, a number 5 wide receiver, something along those lines for an NFL team somewhere. The dude is a monster, and he's very clearly a step above the defenses he's going up against here in spring ball. So I do think he should be getting some looks, at the very least, as a guy that's depth for a wide receiver room somewhere. St. Louis technically finished the day with -5 yards on the ground rushing, which is that's kind of a wild thing here, but obviously that has to do with the final play of the game, the punter taking, I think it was like a negative 37-yard loss or whatever it may be. So even if they did kind of get shut down on the ground, that number aside, I think what we saw this week was a prime example of how St. Louis can still win football games, even if they do kind of become one-dimensional, just because of how good their passing attack is. The defense needs their flowers, of course. I remember back at like week 1, 2, and 3 where I was kind of unsure of this defense, but following the next 4 weeks, this defense has just come into form and has become one of the best units in the UFL, and I think has been massive for the dominance that we've seen from St. Louis in some games here, and a big reason why, even though things were tight through a large majority of this game against Houston, I personally never felt like St. Louis was going to drop this game to Houston. I felt like they had the offense of Houston kind of dead in the water for a vast majority of that game, minus like the touchdown drive alone, but overall, this defense has done an excellent job. I mean, they are currently second in points per game allowed, first in yards per game allowed. They have the second fewest first downs allowed per game. They have the second lowest third down conversion rate in the UFL right now. This team really feels like they are as complete as they come. What they do on the football field with the way they smother offenses, they might not even be like the best pass rush in the UFL, but they bring enough pressure, they disrupt offenses enough, and they are physical enough up front to slow teams down when they're trying to run the football. They're as complete as they come, but can they beat Birmingham next week? That is the question that everyone has on their mind right now. I put up a poll yesterday because I was curious to see what people thought about who the best team was, who wins next week, and it's very split. The last time I looked, it was like 52% Birmingham, 48% St. Louis. It feels like everyone is on the fence, and I cannot wait for this game. But yes, at number 1, since we're kind of talking about them already, the Birmingham Stallions. Who else? The team that is undefeated right now, 6-0. I don't really know how this team could be any better, but it feels like they continue to find ways to do so every single week, and I'm happy to see that Adrian Martinez is the guy that has been given the keys to the car and is allowed to be the one leading this offense going forward, because he came out and basically silenced the doubters. I felt like I was seeing this conversation surrounding Adrian Martinez the last few weeks when the battle between him and Matt Corral was starting to heat up and people were going, who should be the starter going forward? As we get closer to the playoffs, you want to solidify somebody and have them take the reins. And I saw a lot of people say that Adrian Martinez is more of just a legs guy. He's not a pure passer. He can't throw the football with the best of them the way he would need to. And then he comes in and posts 368 yards and 4 passing touchdowns and only runs the ball 5 times for 25 yards, which is still a nice 5-yard per carry clip. So there was talk about him not being a drop back quarterback, but I'm glad that he stepped in this week and basically shut up everybody, because that was one thing where I was like, I don't know, man. I feel like I'm watching him throw the football, and just because he can extend plays with his legs doesn't mean he can't do a good job. This is not the first time he's threw for a ton of yards. So I was kind of curious where that conversation was coming from, and I'm happy to see that my feelings on that were proven right based off the performance he had this week. I mean, 10 different players made a catch, 7 had 2 or more catches. On top of that, you had 6 different players go for receptions over 20 yards in this game. Like, this was a unbelievable performance, and one that I think Adrian Martinez needed to really solidify himself and, silence the critics. And this is all while you still manage like 99 yards on the ground rushing. And this is a team that has dominated on the ground week in and week out. But I'm glad that we got to see this type of performance here where Adrian Martinez can clearly drop back and pass. And, yes, he's going up against the Memphis Showboats, and you can question that defense and how good they are, and the opportunities he was given may not present themselves against some of the better teams in the UFL. Sure, that's fair, but I will say that he's going up against, in my opinion, the worst team in the UFL. That's the exact type of game you should be having. You should be dumpstering your opponent in that situation, and they did that offensively. And then defensively, I cannot praise just the entire defense as a whole enough. Like, you go through the stat sheet and you're trying to pick out guys that had outstanding performances, who really filled out the numbers. And there isn't really somebody who stood out to me that really popped my eyes out this week that I was like, wow. But the one thing that stood out to me was that everybody on this defense is contributing. The amount of players that have 3, 4, 5 tackles or more. On top of that, you have 3 sacks this week, all coming from a different player. Every single tackle for loss is from a different player. You got multiple guys with pass breakups. This defense as a whole is so well-rounded, and there's so many contributions coming from all over the field, even guys that aren't starters coming in and making plays. This is, in my opinion, the best team in spring football. They just do not let up against anyone that they're going against. And again, if it wasn't for like a late 12 points where at this point the game's kind of in the bag, no matter what Memphis does, they're not coming back. And at this point, you're looking towards next week. If those 12 points don't happen, we're talking like a 30-point win where Birmingham is just kind of waltzing into their matchup against St. Louis. So I don't know how you stop Birmingham. St. Louis has one hell of a tall task this week, but I cannot stress enough how excited I am for this matchup here. The two best teams in the league going head-to-head late in the season. This was a game that I circled on the games that I was looking forward to the most like months ago when the schedule released, and I'm glad that it's being billed and it's weighing out to the hype that I was hoping it would have, where you have a team that is undefeated against a team that has one lone loss off of a wild 64-yard field goal. Like St. Louis has a good case to potentially be undefeated themselves had it not been for Jake Bates and his unbelievable 64-yarders back-to-back that he was able to nail. So, I mean, we have as good of a heavyweight matchup as we could possibly have coming in for this next week, and I cannot wait to break it down with you all later in the week. So, with that being said, that is it for me. If you made it to the end, as always, I greatly appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions in the comment section down below. Let me hear your power rankings. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.